Happy Friday. It is early. I am barely here. I'm barely here. I'll just say that. No, I know it's thumbs up. I'm glad to be here. Um, Today we're going to be talking really kind of brief overview of dampers, specifically grand dampers. Now, you ask anybody out there, any technician that's done, work on pianos, and they'll say that the grand dampers specifically are up at that kind of upper level of servicing as far as the difficulty. So what I'm going to be showing you is something that you're going to go ahead and work on, and it will take time to kind of master that. And what I mean by what am I mastering? Well, you're mastering the not only the ability for the dampers to work properly, to dampen those strings properly, but to look beautiful in doing so. And because it's one thing to get the piano dampers functional, it's another thing to make it so that they're lifting evenly, beautifully. They're squared up and they look great at the same time as working well. And usually they do go in tandem. Usually if they're lifting all consistently and evenly, then they're working well. And so what the, there's a myriad of tools out there, but for the most part, when I'm regulating dampers, I'm using 3 or 4 tools. I'm using my smiley frowny pliers. Josiah, I don't know if you have a set of these, but these are kind of your basic, we call them smiley frownies here at the Artisan Mentoring. You can call them, no, just call them smiley frownies. Otherwise, you're not going to be, you're not going to know the jargon. So I always have a set of these around when I'm bending the wires. I have a smaller, shorter flathead screwdriver. And, I've had longer ones. I've had really nubby short ones, but I find that roughly that 6 or 7-inch one is just chef's kiss. And make sure that you have it so that the head really fits right into that screw. Because if it's slightly too large, if it's slightly too small, it just messes with you. So go ahead and find a screwdriver, have several of them so that you can test and make sure, okay, it slides in that screw hole just perfectly. Usually I'll only have one more tool, and that is my needle nose pliers. I might, if I'm having issues with the damper wires, also have some kind of a plier to grip. So, basic tools, right? This is basic stuff. And with these tools, you're going to need to do roughly 5 different adjustments. Okay, so every damper needs to have roughly a potential of 5 different adjustments made to it. Now, what I am going to show you is roughly what these 5 adjustments are, and then kind of challenge you to do what we did with our most recent hire, Daniel, and he did a fantastic job. So we have the little Samick Grand, very similar, Justin, to your Howard, and I said, okay, I want you to go ahead and pull out, literally unscrew and pull out all the dampers, and then go ahead and put them back. And it was a great, great experience for him. And so I showed him the technique to do these 5 adjustments so that everything would work properly. Now, luckily with the Samick Grand, just like your Howard, Justin, things will not be so out of sync or out of whack to begin with. You're not going to have crazy bended wires. It's going to probably be fairly close. So the reality of getting it working again pretty easily should be something that's attainable within the day. And it did. It took him all day to do it. And he was kind of like, okay, I did it. That was a lot. And I was so proud of him. He was really proud of himself because to be able to remove all the dampers from the cavity of the piano, put them on the table, and then put them back and then have them work is a huge win. And so I highly recommend that. So you will simply literally go through all of your dampers. You can decide how you want to do this. So what I did with Daniel, is so we have the damper pedal right here. I told him I want to set this in the piano. So I don't want you, I told him, let's not brace it up. Let's go ahead and let it fall down the tray and let's not brace it up so that we know where we're supposed to come back to. We're going to set that in the piano. You don't have to do that. And what I mean by that is these dampers right now are set to lift at a certain point. And that is usually about halfway to a third the keystroke. So that key teeter-totter comes up and it hits the end tab of this damper lever roughly a third the distance of that hammer travel. And so typically you have this tray blocked up. This is even difficult for me to explain. Dampers are so like kind of difficult in this sense. So what I'm trying to say is, let's back up. If you look at your grand piano and you press that damper pedal, what's going to happen is that tray, as you can see, this is the tray right here, is going to lift. And it's going to lift to hit all of these damper levers. And these damper levers will be elevated off of that tray. And so a lot of times what we'll do is we will go ahead and raise this tray to where these damper levers are hitting, so that when we take the damper heads off, those levers won't fall down to below where we want them to go. So with your first round, I do recommend bracing up this tray, usually with some kind of a wedge, to where those damper levers are touching it at the rest position. Does that make sense to people? Michael?
Yeah, because you know, if you let it drop too far, then when you reinstall, they're already too low, and you got to make that adjustment. So you're lifting that rail so that you're setting it more in sort of like a rough position of where it should be, and then you're going to do your refinements.
That's exactly it. And so with the dampers outside of the cavity of the piano, outside of those damper levers, what you really want to make sure is that they're all in line, that they're all either numbered, or you just make sure to keep them in order, because that can cause a lot of issues. But there's going to be 5 adjustments that you're going to need to make. Now, this is also a good time to make sure that they're going through the damper guide rails, which is right here. You see that this is the damper guide rail that's going to be in your piano, and there's going to be obviously these holes that are bushed, and sometimes those bushings can swell up and they need to be eased. So if they need to be eased, go ahead and ease them. A lot of times I'll just take another tool and kind of rotate it around, just kind of widen that hole. But you're going to simply drop the dampers back in to the damper levers. And this is a great first thing to do, because in theory, you're not going to have to make any of these big critical bends in the damper wire. You're just going to go ahead and have to do a twisting of the wire, and then making sure that this head is centered just right. So let's go over the 5 adjustments. The first one, that is the most simple, is your back to front. So we want this to be going down and hitting that string perfectly level. We don't want it to be going like this or like that. So this is one of those first adjustments, is just the front to back. And you can see, okay, that's not hitting both of the felts evenly on that string. So that's adjustment number 1 that you need to know about. Stacy, are you frozen? Okay, sorry. It looked like it was frozen. I was like, am I frozen? So that's the first one. That's the first one that people kind of need to know of. Because what a lot of times what I see is that one of those damper felts is contacting the string and not the other. You want them to go ahead and contact them evenly. Now, there is some debate on, oh, you should have the tail or the front one land a little bit before the other. And we can get into some of that theory later on, but I just wanted to let you know that this is one of those 5 adjustments. The other adjustment, since we're right here at the head, is the angle right here. And now you're able to twist that, bend that side to side, so that it's basically squaring the head on the string. So if we have front to back, the next one we can call squaring the damper, so it is not twisted one way or the other, and that is simply bending back or forth. Now they do make a really slick, like a needle nose type plier that comes down, and it's made for this, and where you can put it down here and go back or forth. That's a slick tool. I don't know what they cost, but that might be worth getting as well. So that's the second one. The third adjustment is actually right here. It's either twisting this. So what happens sometimes is, let's pretend this is the string right here. Let's get the angle. There we go. It's so hard to do like it. All right, so the twisting the back and forth is sometimes it'll come up off the string and go like this. Oopsie. It'll come up and go wink, wink. And what that is an adjustment that needs to be made down here at the wire. You need to use your needle nose or some kind of pliers and twist it back or forth, and then get up with it with the damper lever. So I'm just going to show you right here. What that looks like is this. Typically how I do this is I kind of will lift up on it, and then I'll see, is it coming up evenly? And if not, then I'm going to twist it side to side so that it comes up and not only goes up, but comes back down evenly, straight up and down. So that's that third adjustment. Again, it's in that wire right here, and it's a twisting of it. The fourth adjustment, and some of these were getting more and more difficult, as you can see. The next adjustment is actually bending the wire. And in some pianos, you're going to have this come out of the damper head and it'll go straight down. In other pianos, you're going to see this. And you can see that there's several bends. It comes here, then it goes over here, and then it comes, and then it does another bend. And so those bends are to adjust it coming out of that, how should I say this? Those bends are to make it so that that damper wire meets up down below with that damper lever. So let's just say this was messed with and this was straight. Okay, this is a straight wire, pretend that. But the damper lever is over here. You would need to do several bends to meet up with that hole so that you can actually drop that damper wire inside that lever. Does that make sense? Josh, are you tracking here? I know this is more high level stuff, and we're going to go into more of it, but it is kind of the basics of it. The last bend that we do, and I'm not doing these in any real order of you need to do this first. It's more of just here's all the 5 adjustments that you'll make. And the last one is one of the more difficult ones. And honestly, I didn't even know about this one until fairly late in my career. But that's this bend right here. Now, Michael, I'm curious if you guys went over this particular bend in your damper class that you went to.
Yes.
What did they have to say about that? Because I'm very curious.
I don't remember exactly, but I know we covered it. I'd have to go dig out my notes.
Yeah. So the basic premise of dampers is they need to come up evenly. Oopsie. I'm going to try to do this as still as possible. They need to come up evenly as possible. They can't be moving off of the string, and they can't be shooting to the sides. They need to be coming up evenly. Now, sometimes what will happen is you're like, okay, I have this so it's traveling perfectly up and down, but the string is a little bit to the side or a little bit over here, and it's kind of clunking over. It's not bending one way or the other, but it's not seated just right on top of that string. And that's where this bend comes in.
Yeah, that's what I remember now. So you have the bends of the wire. There's technically three typically. The 2 lower that you're pointing at right now are related to adjustments into the lever, and the one up above is the adjustment of the head to the string.
The string, exactly. And so what that is, I think, the most difficult bend to do because it's so temperamental.
it's
So
also the most, it's so fine. There's so you make a tweak and it changes stuff dramatically.
so using your needle nose pliers, you literally come here and can adjust. There's really two bends. As you can see, there's this bend right here, boop. So as it comes out of the head, and then where it goes down. And that we're able to manipulate. So I'm able to go. So now I've made it so that that damper can go further over to hit that string. Or if it's too far, you simply press this in, and now I've made it less. So that is a bend to learn how to do. So again, let's recap. There's 5 bends that typically I will be doing. The front to back bend, making sure that it's seated on the string perfectly with both of the felts contacting the string evenly. There's the squaring off of the head right here. So let's just say it's sitting on the it's sitting on the string, but that head is bent one way or the other. So squaring off the head. The next one is actually twisting the wire after you've tightened it in the damper lever so that when it comes off of the string, it's not twisting left or right. And so if it's coming up and it's twisting left or right, going to side, that means that down here where it's connected in the lever, you need to go ahead. Basically, that screw is pressed up against that wire and it's pushing it one way direction or the other. So instead of unscrewing that, most people will just take that wire and twist it one way or the other so it lifts and comes out of that string perfectly. So that's the third bend. The fourth is actually bending this wire down here, and you will bend this wire so that it's meeting up right where that damper lever hole is, so that it is actually meeting where it needs to go. And then fifth is right up here. I need a coffee after that. That's a lot. That's a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Like that. This is, for those that are getting into the industry, this is one that I would say don't try this too early, because you might feel somewhat discouraged. Because I was absolutely discouraged when I tried this too early, and I'm like, what am I even doing? This is like a whole nother level. So just breathe through it. No, just think about these bends first and foremost. And what I would do, Justin, if I were you, is I would, once you feel comfortable, again, remove all of those dampers and just put them back. Just put them back. And maybe you start with the flat felt. So that would be the upper treble. The nice thing about that treble area is that it doesn't have the wedge felts. It doesn't have trichord felts. It's just flat. So you're not going to have to worry about those, twisting or needing weird things. You're simply going to go ahead and slide them down through the guide rail, put them back, and then tighten them within the damper lever right here, and tighten that screw. And then the final thing, you're just going to use your needle nose pliers and twist and tilt them so that they're even with that string. And so I would start with just that flat felt in the high treble. Usually there's a whole section of about 15 or 20 max of damper felts that are flat, and that would be a great start so that you're like, okay, I'm getting this. They're lifting evenly. They're doing what they need to be doing. This is one of those things that one of these services, one of these skills that is hard to learn and build on and then master, because usually you don't have access to doing it, unless you own the piano and you're feeling confident of working on your own and doing this level of work to your own. You're usually not having access to that. So that's why I think a lot of people struggle with dampers, is because they just simply haven't had as much exposure to it, and they maybe haven't had as much oversight on how to do them. And then with the damper work, a lot of times you can get to where you've bent the wires so many times, you're like, I don't even know where to go with this. And so if that is the case, and I've done this in the past, and I think because we've had this action model for years, I think this is the one that we kind of worked on with, PTA when we were filming one of the rounds of that. They're years. But these things are pretty all over the place. So what I'm actually probably going to do is straighten them up and just make it so that they're perfectly straight, so that I'm kind of starting from, ground zero, and then just kind of reset everything. And that's something that you can do as well. It's just like, okay, I'm too far down this rabbit hole. Let's go ahead and re-straighten this one that I'm having a hard time with, and just kind of go from there. Another thing that you can do, and this is what I told Daniel or Tech, is look at the neighboring ones that you haven't messed with yet. See what kind of bends roughly they're doing, so that you can match those up, what you're doing with that, so that you can kind of get in the ballpark at least. So I'm curious, what's been all your experience with dampers? I'm curious, Stacy, because you work with technicians, a lot of technicians over the years. What is the general vibe when it comes to damper work from everybody here?
Everyone who's starting struggles. That is one thing I've noticed. Like, it's a little overwhelming. Like they'll feel like they're spending hours and hours, and they're like, I feel like I'm making it worse. I've heard that a lot. So it's a lot, like you said, practice. And then like one of the three reasons we get called back is, dampers will be one of them. Like it's ringing weird, or there's a that kind of thing. And then of course sticky keys, or it actually needs voicing. They'll say it sounds weird, but it just needs some voicing. Those are the three, but yeah, you'll run into it.
A lot of times they'll say it's a sticking key and it'll be a ringing damper. Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever our techs go out to do a follow-up if needed, I always have them write like what happened and because I'm just curious, Mm-hmm. And plus we can send that to them and show them like, hey, this didn't have anything to do with the tuning, but we still took care of it for you. So that's really nice. But yeah, dampers are tricky. I was actually taking a ton of notes because I don't know a lot about dampers, grand dampers. I was like, oh, this is technical for me.
This would be one of those things when we do the in-persons that we would definitely want to potentially just kind of spend a day with the group and just be like, okay, we are working on dampers like in the pianos and just kind of playing with them. Because it's just one of those things that people just don't have a lot of exposure and a lot of ability to just work on the dampers and stuff.
So David, when you do a full removal of all the dampers, are you using a cardboard box to set all the dampers in to keep them in line? How are you usually pulling them out?
That's a smart idea to have just to have it numbered and you put them in.
I know I've seen like a damper rack somewhere in my perusal of YouTube and stuff, where they have a wood block, wood frame that they are able to put all the dampers in. I think I was on one of the Steinway factory builds or something like that.
Yeah, when we ran a full restoration facility. We did about 3, 4, 5 pianos a month, and we would have dampers everywhere. And so what we did is, we had we built these little carrying systems, and so it was basically just a 2x4 block on either side, and then it had a V-shape, 2 V-shaped bars attached to it, so that basically that was that center that was hollowed out, so that we can just drop these dampers in it. And that's what we would do. We've since gotten rid of all that stuff, so typically I'll just kind of put them in a cardboard box like you're saying. It's just like, hey, this is, or I'll just be very careful knowing that I'm going to put these right back today. I'm not going to mess around with them. I'll just set them on the table, all in line, because I usually have a workbench right next to it. But if you're going to take a couple days, and if you have a cat or a kid or a whatever, you put them in something that's going to keep them in line and not fall apart. Because boy, I've had that happen where just one of them is off. It's like, oh, I mixed up one, and then it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah, I would recommend numbering them if there's any chance.
Yeah.
Oh.
Are you numbering them on the bottom side of the damper?
That's a good idea. That's actually a really good idea. I typically will do it just very low on the side.
Low on the side. Yeah,
that's where I usually would. Yeah, right there.
But I like the idea of the bottom of it. That's actually better.
It might be hard to do the bottom, but
yeah. No, that's a good idea. Yeah. No, damper stuff. Yeah, whenever the damper stuff comes in, it's like, okay, is it something that we need to manipulate the damper itself? Is it a friction issue either in the guide rail or in the flanges of the levers? So, I mean, there's three things right there. Or maybe it's the pedal needs to be adjusted because it's there's no lost motion in the pedal. There's a lot of variables to this stuff. And so I'm really glad that people are here to kind of just discuss it and have that outlet to be like, hey, this is what I'm running up against. What are the 5 things? What should I be looking for? Because it's another echelon of work.
How often over time have you seen where you're having to work on the rail bushings and adjust those to allow more freedom of motion of the wire through the bushing?
The only time I'm ever having to do that is in rebuilds. Funny enough.
Okay.
It's been in either the rebuilding that we've done on a customer's piano or somebody else has done, and then it's moved and it's come to our climate. Those bushings, so same with key bushings. Yeah. So I'm usually never easing key bushings because most of these 100-year-old or 50-year-old pianos, they're if anything, they're wobbly.
So really, it's only in the change of the environment of the piano that you're having to really look at that or deal with it. Otherwise, it's just normal maintenance of something has shifted, say like piano got moved, some of these dampers shifted in movement, and then you're having to readjust them, get them realigned.
The only other thing I've noticed is pets, specifically cats, for these grand dampers. I can't tell you how many times I've come to a piano where one of these felts or a handful of them will be ripped in a weird way. And I'll just be like, do you have a cat? And they're like, oh yeah, my cat always gets inside there. That happens a lot. And so there is a time where I'll go ahead and have to do some damper work. But for the most part, no, I'm not having to do a lot of this. If anything, I'm having to change maybe the timing. So the customer's like, hey, I want this to play as smooth, as light as possible. And I'll look at it, I'm like, wow. As soon as that key is being pressed, it's raising those dampers. So I'm like, let's go ahead and make it so that that key is having to travel further before the player feels that engagement, that weight. So I'll change the timing. Now, luckily, in a lot of modern pianos, what they have is just like uprights will have a spoon. A lot of modern pianos will have a spoon, literally a spoon that comes off of the tail end of these damper levers, and you'll be able to adjust that up or down without having to change anything up here, which is kind of slick. Another thing that they'll have a lot of times is a capstan right where that tray meets that underlever, and you're able to do fine adjustments. All the things. Yeah, pretty straightforward, right? That's not too hard. I was like, how can we talk about dampers? I'm like, let's talk about dampers on a Friday as we drink coffee, because even as we talk about it, I think of all the hundreds of times that I've done things with dampers, and it kind of floods back, and I'm like, oh, that's a lot. And I remember making this mistake or doing this, or I had that win, or I didn't do this. So yeah. It's a good coffee hour discussion.
Yeah, I'm excited to take all mine out and start figuring this out.
I'm excited to take a picture for the group when they're like laying out, and just so everybody can kind of see what that looks like, because it's cool. It's really cool, and
yeah,
I'm really happy you got that grand, Justin. You're just gonna.
I've had people be like, my key's sticky, and I'm like, I can look at it, but I don't know anything yet because I don't have one to work on. Yeah. Thankfully, it's been like just stuff inside the keys.
Yep.
But
yeah.
Now I got some. I just need to buy some more tools.
Yeah. No, I've noticed that once the technicians, because a lot of times when we get technicians come to Artisan and they start working, with us, they're like, yeah, I really know a ton about uprights. I'm like, how about grands? And they're like, crickets. And so to be able to have the grand at your disposal, just to be able to work on it at your own pace, to get used to the tuning, because it's a different posture. It's different. Get used to all of that.
That's a great point for newer technicians. And I learned that, quickly, luckily enough that, I got to work on quite a few grands as I started. And yeah, the posture is different. The feel is different between uprights and grands. And it gets if you work on tons of uprights, it's intimidating. If you've never touched a grand, it's like, how is this going to work?
Yeah. If and when I was, what I've recommended with, working with students over the past, is saying, hey, if you can get a grand piano, an upright piano, and a spinet, which, by the way, you can go and get stuff like that on Craigslist, OfferUp, for cheap. I mean, you're probably talking $1,500 with some of this stuff. I mean, the piano that we got at the office was $1,000. And so you can find these pianos for really cheap. And again, they're just going to be workhorse practice pianos. And if you can find room in your, even if you rent out a storage unit, to put them in.
That's what I have. I have a storage unit
really?
with my practice pianos that I'm practicing on. And yeah, it's an outlay of cash, but it's worth it to have that as my, practice facility, and be able to refer back to, okay, I can pull the action, see how this one does. Now, granted, it doesn't cover everything, because piano, each piano is different, and my 1918 Thompson's not going to be like a modern Yamaha upright, but but it gives you a frame of reference and a play area to play around with.
Yeah. And you all know this, but like in the beginning, when you're skilling up, when you're starting your businesses, you have more time. You have a lot of time. If you're going to be doing this full time, you are not full time in customers' houses yet. It's a gradual thing, but with every hour that you're not working, you need to be building your skills, building, what you can do. I heard something the other day, by the way, and I'll go over it at some point. This guy said that, he was asked, do you do work for free? And he's like, yes, I did work for free, especially early on, and I still do it. And he says, whatever I do, it has to build one of the 3 Bs. And I thought this was really good. It has to build it either has to build a bridge, so a bridge to something else, or bigger and better. It needs to build my book of business, portfolio, or it needs to build my bank account. That's what he spends his time building, 3 Bs. I thought that was really cool, really good. He needs to build the 3 Bs. And I like that bridge. We're doing a lot of free work for, teachers and stuff like that, because it builds the bridge. Doing cheaper, freer work to get some reviews, that builds your portfolio. All of these things. So, especially early on, I do agree. I do be okay with doing this free work, because you're building that reputation. Nobody's gonna really hire you until you have that experience, until you have some of that notoriety, some of that reviews. So, don't be afraid of that. And we'll get into more of that, but sorry, that was a tangent. That's a good tangent. As you're going to find out, you're going to see David does this. It's like squirrel, boom, over there. On Monday, we're going to be going over hammer surfacing. It's so funny because, again, this is one of the old action models. I don't even know, this one has a cool shape to it. I don't even know what happened to this hammer. So we're going to go over that on grand hammer surfacing, and kind of the tools that I like to use, which reminds me I need to order some stuff for over the weekend so it arrives in time. So hopefully this is helpful. I actually have to run to do another meeting, and I'll see you guys on Monday. Bright and early. No, not bright and early. Later on.
All right.
All right, Dustin. Good. See you, Michael.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone. See ya.